Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here today. It's 12 noon, so would like to be prompt and get started. I'd like to say a special thanks to Francisco for joining us today, and in a minute I'll tell you a little bit more about him. For the rest of you, if you are already a friend to Neighbors Who Care, we want to say thank you. For those of you who have known about us, I like to call Neighbors Who Care the Ocotillo Sun Lakes treasure. And the reason why is for the last 26 years, we've been celebrating the 25th anniversary in 2020, this year, 2021, 26 years. We've been offering clients of ours rides to physicians, shopping, and meal delivery to those who qualify, and also case management. So that means when someone reaches out to us for our services, we do a full assessment with a licensed social worker, and our social worker keeps up after them. So as their aging needs change, she is able to make sure that their services continue to match their needs. So we're an amazing group of people who have helped people stay in their homes independent with dignity at least 5 years longer, we estimate. And we're very proud of that. But I have to say that the real treasure of our organization are our volunteers. They are the folks who do these runs for these folks free of charge, day in, day out, week in, week out. And many of them will say that that one thing they do during the week is oftentimes the brightest spot of their week. So I just want to make sure that you guys know that. And maybe you have an hour here or two to spare. If you do, we hope you'll think about joining us. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Francisco, who is founder and managing lawyer at Keystone Law Firm, which is located right in downtown Ocotillo. He's an excellent teacher, speaker, and attorney. So I ask you to give him your attention this afternoon. Thanks again.
Thank you, Cheryl. This is really a lot of fun for me. Maybe not everybody knows, but Cheryl and I have a special relationship that goes back many, many years. We used to work together, and it's a lot of fun for me to see her step into Neighbors Who Care. I was previously on the board there, and we've all had experience with different charities in our lives, and I just have to say, even after being in on the inside, this is just one of the organizations that takes every little resource and stretches it way beyond anybody ever, what you would think is possible. So if you haven't learned more about Neighbors Who Care, this is a time to get to know Cheryl, get to know what they do there. If you can plug in, I really valued the time that I was able to commit and sit on the board with them. But enough about that. Today, it's about the very exciting topic of wills and trusts. Oh my, right? I'm surprised you guys are here. Most people avoid this topic and never want to dip their toe into it. Even the lawyers that I end up working and teaching with, they're like, nope, no thanks. I don't want to touch anything to do with this. But we're here. Good job. And I congratulate you for not being scared of the topic. We are going to record this session because we want to make it available to people who weren't able to make it here today. So I'm going to go ahead and start the recording. Okay, I think I did that right. All right, welcome everybody. So my name is Francisco Sirvent here on behalf of Keystone Law Firm, invited by Neighbors Who Care, who is your host for today. What we're going to talk about and I want to share with you guys is wills and trust, and I hope you can walk away with our short time together today with just a couple nuggets. If you can literally, finish up after this hour together and say, you know what, I learned that and I learned that, and now, I can do something better for my family, great. Or even if you just go 1, 2, 3, you can confirm some things that you've done right. I hope that lets you sleep better at night. As an estate planning lawyer and a probate lawyer, we deal with all the problems. We find out what all the mistakes are. We end up getting called in to work with families who are going through really tough times. And so that helps us see what we can do ahead of that to fix it. And so that's what I want to share with you guys for today. The presentation is called The 12 Deadly Sins of Estate Planning. Isn't that so exciting? There are, unfortunately, Yes, there are more than 12, but 12 is the only number I want to give you today because there's just too much to try to cover. So where we go with this is just each sin. We're just going to chew right through them. And I want you to be able to know what are the biggest mistakes that we see with our clients. Did my screen sharings, did it get paused for some reason? I hope it's still going. Cheryl, give me a chat or a comment if we are still good on the screen share so you guys can see my slides. Okay, so we have an issue with the screen share, and I think I'm going to just refresh the screen share. That should fix it. Yeah, I think maybe we're there. All right, sin number 1. Sin, right? These are sins. Make it as terrible as we can so we avoid them. Sin number 1 really is about your medical and healthcare decisions. This is one of the biggest problems that Arizona has. We're such a huge retirement community that Arizona has really strict laws about how your medical decisions are made. There's no gray area here. The reality is that most of us are going to end up in the medical emergency under some kind of formal clinical setting. It's not going to happen privately in just the comfort of our home. It's going to happen inside of that clinical setting, which is controlled by other people. Every single one of us has had experiences with doctors, with hospitals, with different types of healthcare facilities. And we all know what a joy it is to deal with that bureaucracy. It's a nightmare. And sometimes it goes smoothly. Most of the time, it just seems like it's just one big problem after another. Here's where your will and your trust comes into this. The problem is that during the emergency, if you can't communicate your wishes, then somebody has to be able to do that for you. And if you haven't taken care of your legal documents ahead of time, then there's no way you can do it after the fact, except your family going to get a court order. This is when we get called in. This is when people end up calling my law firm because somebody tells your family in the hospital, hey, you know, who's the power of attorney? Who's the medical power of attorney for mom, for dad? And they scramble, they look, and nobody has the documents. And so the hospital or the facility or the memory care unit or the rehab center will tell the family, well, somebody's got to go get appointed as the guardian. And everybody goes, what's that? Nobody, how do we do that? And they say, we don't know. You have to go to court and get an order. And then somebody hopefully refers you to a good law firm to help you do that. And that's when we get called. And so we have to actually go file a lawsuit, go through a big, ugly nightmare process that costs your family tens of thousands of dollars so the court can appoint another attorney, can appoint a doctor, an accountant, a social worker, sometimes a guardian ad litem. And guess who's paying all these people? Yes, you, right? Paying all these professionals that are strangers to your family to make a decision about who can make the decisions. That's the problem, is this big giant court system that is set up when there's no legal documents in place. And in Arizona, it's especially bad because of the fact that we're a huge retirement community. And so the institutions, the hospitals, the rehab centers, they just don't mess around with us. They might let it kind of slide for a day or so, but then they're going to demand that somebody have legal authority. If you don't have that, you'll end up in there. So what do? How do you avoid this? You have 3 legal documents in place. Okay. The first one is this particular section of what I'm going to tell you about today. The first one is your healthcare power of attorney. It's critical. Every adult needs one of these from 18 all the way up. Every adult needs to have a healthcare power of attorney in place. That's where you say, while you have the capacity, you say in a legal document, I name my wife, I name my husband, I name my children, I name whoever. Even if it's simple, you name this person to make medical decisions for you when you can't make them. And that's it. It's got to be signed, witnessed, notarized correctly But then once it's done, it just sits there in your files until it's needed, if ever. How you avoid all those nightmares. Healthcare power of attorney. In Arizona, that particular document should also include something called the mental health powers. And that's the ability to deal with a psychologist, neuropsychiatrist, if there's ever any kind of brain or cognitive limitation. Okay, that's sin number one. Number two is more about the healthcare stuff. We're still going to stay in the healthcare issue. HIPAA, we've all heard of HIPAA. This has to do with your information being, it's private, can't leave, it's confidential, it's between you and your doctors, you and the hospital. Nobody else is entitled to it. Not even if they're family, not even if they're your spouse. A lot of times the hospital will drip information out if you're the spouse, but they want to see legal documentation. It's a federal law nationwide that says your medical information is private. There's nobody else allowed to get to it. And it creates humongous penalties on doctors, hospitals, rehab centers, anybody who has this information, huge penalties if they release it without permission. And so they don't want to mess around with that because the fines are enormous. So what happens? How do you, so if, mom or dad goes to the hospital and it's an emergency and, the kids don't know about it, the family doesn't know about it yet, and then they find out, mom fell at the house and was taken by ambulance, the kids call the hospital and say, what room is mom or dad in? Is the hospital allowed to answer that? No, they're not. They are not supposed to answer that. The hospital could be fined. And I think the fines are in the six figures, hundreds of thousands of dollars if they release medical information, including who is a patient there. So they're supposed to say, sorry, we can't release information about who may or may not be a patient here. So then what? Again, you're stuck going to get a court order that says you can get that information. Tens of thousands of dollars, lawyers, probate. It's a living probate system. That's how all of this gets taken care of if you don't do it yourself. So ahead of time, the way you take care of this is you have your second medical document. It's called a HIPAA authorization. That's it. And it says, hey, if I am an emergency, these people, you can name your spouse, your kids, your pastor, whoever you want. You can name as many people on there as you want. They're allowed to call and say, what room is mom or dad in? They have my permission. Create that simple document and then boom, super easy. Nobody has to worry about being locked out of that and having to go to court to get that information. We had one where the son, it was actually her 23-year-old son, was being transferred to a new hospital. The new hospital said that, I'm sorry, there's nobody in here, there's no documentation that says you have authority to know anything about your son. He was unconscious. His health was declining rapidly, and they had diagnosed that he was not going to survive. And they were telling her, we're going to remove life support unless you get a court order, literally for her 24-year-old son. So Thursday afternoon, she's calling law firms. We get somehow referred. We rush out Friday morning, scramble with our whole team to get a court order Friday morning and get the judge to say, yes, mom, you can go and see what's going on. She went, found out what's going on. She told this hospital they're crazy, moved him to a new hospital, got him on a whole round of antibiotics. Turned out he had a terrible raging infection. And by Tuesday, he was waking up. So having this HIPAA authority in place is critical. She had to waste thousands of dollars just to be able to do that. All right, sin number 3, more medical stuff, okay? More medical stuff. What this is, it's a little bit differently. It's not about who's got authority or who's got permission to make decisions. This one is about who is gonna pay the bill. Who, or I shouldn't say who, how you're gonna pay the bill. We're gonna talk about who in just a minute. This is how the bill is gonna get paid, right? Healthcare is expensive. And if talking with lots of my clients, this is one of the biggest things people are worried about is, what if I have a massive healthcare expense that's not covered by insurance? Is it just going to run me dry? Is it just going to, deplete everything I have until I'm broke? And the answer is, yeah, of course. Like, where else is it going to come from? Well, the biggest expense is that of a long-term care stay. So Medicare And regular health insurance, Blue Cross, Aetna, all these regular health insurance types, they are the ones that will pay for the hospital stay, pay for prescription drugs, they'll pay for doctor visits, things like that. But when it comes to once you're out of the hospital, okay, and you move into that, maybe you have to go to rehab, maybe you have to go to long-term facility, either to continue getting better, or maybe it's something like dementia or Alzheimer's, where you're just in a long-term memory care unit or group home. Those things, once you get past 100 days from the hospital, Medicare will cover the first 100 days, but after that, out of pocket, 100%, 100% out of pocket, and you're on your own. Imagine that in Maricopa County right now, the average cost is over $6,000 a month. It's ridiculously expensive. If you want a private room, you're looking at more like $9,000 a month out of pocket. So what do? Don't wait until the emergency. Okay, there are 3 ways to take care of this expense. The first one, obviously, some people have just built up enough of a nest egg. They have the savings. They're more than capable of paying that bill. $300,000-$400,000 risk for them is not going to affect their financial stability. For most people, that would affect their financial stability and feel very financially insecure at having to spend $400,000 in the last few years of their life. Or, maybe I don't want to self-fund it because I want to leave that to my kids, whatever. But that's first option. Second option is you look at what public benefits are available to you. There's 2 programs there. One's through the Veterans Administration, and the other is through the Arizona Long-Term Care System. That one is a benefit that comes under the umbrella of the Medicaid program, which covers tons of these expenses when Medicare does not cover them. The third option, which sometimes it's too late to do that, but is to look at insurance, because there is additional insurance you can buy that can cover that expense. And you do have to buy it before you need it. You usually have to buy it while you're still healthy. Sometimes, about 60, 65 years old is the latest you can buy it and it still be affordable. So if you're in that bracket of ages, or somebody who is, that's the time to buy insurance. But if not, if you can't get the insurance and you don't want to just pay out of pocket on this stuff, then planning for public benefits is your third option. And it's a great option. We had a guy who was, actually, it wasn't the guy, it was the mom. The daughter called us because mom had been in memory care for about a year, and it was just depleting their estate. I think they were paying about $4,000 or $5,000 a month. And the dad was sort of slowly looking at his financial security slipping as the mom was taking their life savings. And so the daughter came to us and said, is there anything we can do? Well, right when she asked that question, the dad had a stroke. Dad goes to the hospital. It was a massive stroke. It looked quite grim, his recovery, but they said he's going to be fine. Had to put him on a ventilator. He's otherwise okay. He's going to wake up, but it looks like he's going to be on a ventilator the rest of his life. What that means is he has to be in a skilled nursing facility with skilled nursing staff who can manage the ventilator. Holy cow. Well, he gets discharged to the first rehab center, and then Medicare is going to pay for 100 days. Well, what happens right at the beginning of that? The billing department of the rehab center sits down with the daughter and says, hey, we've got 100 days covered here by Medicare. What are you going to do at the end of that? I don't know. How does she answer that? She has no idea. She's like, well, how much is this going to be? They tell her it's going to be $21,000 a month. $21,000 a month to be able to continue taking care of her dad. You can't move him. You can't go shopping for a cheaper skilled nursing facility. That's just is what it is. So she comes back to us, says, here's what happened. Is there anything we can do? The answer was yes. We got them rearranged all their finances, special trust planning, special annuity planning, got their assets completely protected. Their nest egg that they did have left, which was about $300,000, got him. He had to pay 1 month out of pocket, which wasn't fun, but only 1 month. Then Medicaid picked up, Arizona Long-Term Care System picked up the bill, saved them hundreds of thousands of dollars. So public benefit planning, is that an option? It might be. It's something to look into. All right, now here is who. Who is going to pay the bills? Who's going to take care of your finances? We haven't even gotten to the point what happens after we die, right? Wills versus trust. Here is where we start to look at wills versus trust, okay? Number one thing you need to know about wills, they do nothing for you while you're alive. They don't kick in until after death, okay? A will does nothing while you're alive, only kicks in after death. So what does take care of me while I'm alive? Well, for the medical stuff, it's the things we just talked about, okay? But for the finances during life, there's only two things. It's your trust, okay, and a durable power of attorney. I recommend both of those for just about anybody. It's no more complicated in your life than having a will only. It just does a much better job. Here's what happens. If something happens during life, there's an emergency, and you need somebody to take care of your finances. If you don't have these things squared away, then you have a court process to do it for you. Okay, like I said, we get these calls all the time, and I don't want any more of them. A court conservatorship is what it's called. And inside of a court conservatorship, that's where somebody is appointed, usually a family member, to take care of your finances. We have a family right now where we literally just had a trial. We had a trial. We got to present evidence. We had to present testimony. We had to get experts involved. We had one, child accusing the other one of ridiculous things, even though they all were getting along before and just had normal, sibling rivalries. Now they're actually under oath on the stand testifying against each other because one of them is the one who's most capable of taking care of mom's business, and the other ones aren't even in town, but they still feel necessary to share their opinions. Mom didn't have a power of attorney in place. She sort of just thought my kids will be able to take care of me. I mean, it's my kids, that's what happens. And you know what? In some other states where it's less formal and where the laws are a little more flexible, it does happen like that. But in Arizona, we just are a very big retirement state. There was too much exploitation happening of our vulnerable population that the laws here have just gotten really strict. And so if you don't have that power of attorney and that trust in place when the emergency happens, and somebody needs to be able to go to your bank and cash your checks and pay your bills and deal with, maybe clearing your house out, getting your house ready for sale. It's not all there, then they have to go to court and get appointed by the judge. And that's even more expensive than any probate after death. The average cost of a conservatorship right now is about $30,000 in probate fees. And then it stays in place for the rest of your life. Every single year, your family has to account to the court and say exactly, here's what I've done. Pennies in and pennies out. They got to account for everything. That annual process can cost $5,000 to $10,000. It's all in the public record. None of it's private. It's ridiculously burdensome. A good power of attorney, a good trust that's kept up to date is going to avoid all of that. Okay, let your family do actually what you want them to do, which is just deal with things privately within the family without having to involve the court. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second because that was sin number 4. I promised you 12, but sin number 5 and sin number 6, I had to completely throw away. Not because they've been solved forever, but because those 2 sins are things that just take forever to go through. So I'm just going to give you the quick bullet point. Number 5 is failing to make sure your nest egg is not about to go to zero in the stock market. Okay. Too many people out there don't know how to just properly diversify their nest egg. And it's not complicated. It's very simple. I invite you to go get my friend John Hagenson's book on his website, KeystoneWealthPartners.com. Free book where he explains how to do it. Learn that stuff. That's sin number 5. Sin number 6 is the same kind of topic, but it has to do with how much commission-driven advisors are making at the cost of their clients. There's too many people out there that don't know that their financial advisors are actually commission-driven salespeople. And if you don't know how your financial advisor is getting paid, to me, that's a red flag. And in John's book at KeystoneWealthPartners.com, he tells you how they get paid, how advisors out there are all getting paid. So you can see, am I paying commissions here that I don't know about? Are you recommending things that are in my best interest or in your best interest? Well, wait, if you give me a choice between A, B, and C, are you making a 1%, 5%, 10% commission? Or are you just recommending the thing to me that gives you the 10% commission? You need to know this stuff. He discloses all that in the book. Go get it. All right, that's sin number 6. Moving on. Sin number 7 is failing to plan for and understand your estate taxes. This is a big thing that is going to change again now with the new administration. Estate taxes right now, today, February, let's say the 18th, 2021, the law hasn't changed yet, but the proposals are going to make a big change. But today, for somebody who dies today, they get to pass on $11.5 million to anyone, to their heirs and pay 0 estate tax, right? That's good. That means most people pay 0 estate tax. Now, if you're under that, you pay 0 estate tax. Doesn't mean you pay 0 income tax. Doesn't mean you pay 0 capital gains tax. It means you pay 0 estate tax. You'll still end up paying income tax and capital gains taxes out of your estate, okay, pursuant to those tax laws. But estate taxes, you'll pay 0. Now, anything on top of that, okay, anything on top of that will pay 40% to the government. That's what the estate tax is. So what's the proposal? Well, the proposal is to take the $11.5 million free that goes with 0 estate tax and to drop it to $3.5 million. Okay, so only the first $3.5 million is free. Then everything on top of that will pay 45% estate taxes. So it's about a $4 million tax bill difference on your estate tax. Now, what I mentioned was, yes, you do pay income taxes still, is that the piece of your estate that you pass with 0 estate taxes, you still have to pay income taxes. So if that is made up of things like 401ks, IRAs, or other retirement accounts, then those still are going to pay income taxes at whatever income tax rate your beneficiaries pay every year. So if they're in the 25% tax bracket, they're going to pay 25% to the government. All of these taxes, okay, they're all avoidable with good planning and good strategies. You can use things like a charitable trust. You can use a retirement trust. You can use some irrevocable life insurance trusts. These are all very sophisticated, complex tools, but with some good planning, you can literally avoid every single tax if you want to. So I don't have time to go through all those, but just to plant the seed, okay? Sin number 8 is thinking that grown children don't need protection. I'm one of these grown children, right? My parents are in their 60s and 70s, and I'm a responsible kid. Been married 20 years this year. Nobody's suing me. I'm not in bankruptcy. Pretty responsible. What happens? Life hits us in ways we don't expect it. Have you ever had something surprise you and kind of come out of left field? That's how things happen, right? We don't expect bad things to happen. And so if they do, is your estate protected? Under a will, under, naming kids as beneficiaries, you can't protect them from losing their inheritance to these things. But under a trust, you can say, hey, here's your inheritance. But if you ever get divorced, from your spouse, if you ever get sued on accident, you just got into a car accident, and they sued you, or maybe they're in a profession that's kind of high risk. They're an engineer, they're a lawyer, they're a doctor. And if they get sued, it's going to be bad. If they ever had to file bankruptcy, right? Any of these things, if they get an inheritance, that inheritance can be lost to those things just as easy as they got it. But if you give it to them through a trust, you can actually give it to them in a way that's protected from those things. They can't lose it. Nobody can come get it except for them. That's what a trust does. So it gives it to them, but they can't lose it. Sin number 9 is failing to transfer your values. My favorite thing to do with our clients is when we're all done with their plan, we sit down and we have them capture just a conversation like I'm doing with you guys, except it's not one way, right? We go through a couple questions and we help them capture something more than just the boring legal documents on the paper, on the table. We help them capture their voice, and we ask them a couple questions. Hey, tell us something some big thing you accomplished in your life. Tell us something that was just you were exceptionally proud of doing. Give us a fun memory you had when your kids were young, or tell us how you and each other met. We capture a few of these moments just in a simple audio recording, no video because people are afraid of video, but just a simple audio recording. And we use that to kind of plant the seed that there's more to this whole thing than just the legal documents and just your stuff, right? Your stuff is your stuff, and your family's going to really appreciate that you took the time to get it arranged. But when we get to hand over an audio recording of your voice, that's where you're passing on something bigger. And I recommend every single person take some time to capture your values. My own grandpa, he actually, over the course of about 10 or 15 years, he actually wrote out stories from his childhood, growing up on a farm in Western Nebraska, going to war. I mean, he was in the Army in a pretty scary battalion. Some of the stories from that, some of the stories from when he married my grandma, raising the kids, some kind of really gut-wrenching challenges he dealt with as an adult. And he shared those stories. He wrote them down and he shared those with us. And even now, I go back to those and I just flip through. He wasn't a particularly good writer, but I don't care. These are real, authentic, true stories that I get to learn something from. And I recommend that you all take a few minutes to do that. You don't need a lawyer to help you do that. You can do that on your own. And I recommend that you try to get some of those stories down. Even if I only got one done, great. Share it, put it in with your trust so they find it when they have to go through that process. Sin number 10, failing to organize and consolidate. This one, how many of you have, they don't offer this too much anymore, but how many of you ever opened a bank account over at the bank down the road because they were giving away like a free toaster or something? Ha ha ha, right? Yeah, I'm sure there's some of you that are guilty of that. We've all done it. You get the thing in the mail that says, $200 if you open a new checking account with us, right? Oh, isn't that so kind of them? Aren't they so nice? Well, obviously they have an incentive to do that. But that's okay. They're allowed to. The problem that this creates is now your financial life is spread around across all of these institutions. If you have the more businesses you have dealings with, the more complicated it is for your family. Okay, simple means you just have the minimum number that you need. And one of the misnomers that I've seen is that people will actually work with multiple different financial institutions. They'll be at Bank of America and Chase, and then they'll have some things at Fidelity and Vanguard and Schwab, and they work with this one financial advisor, but they don't tell them about everything because they have some things over here. They feel like this is what makes them diversified. That's what you may not be aware of is that if you're not aware of how to look at the underlying investments of across all of your accounts, this one may be nice and blended, right? A properly diversified portfolio. This one on its own might think it's properly diversified, but what they don't know, when you combine and overlap them, you actually have more risk than you realized. You may be way riskier than you realized. And so what I tell clients is you've got to have somebody looking at the whole picture, and you've got to know what the whole picture is. So consolidate, then know what your diversification is so that you're not overly risky, but make sure you've got a list of everything. That is one of the biggest keys that's going to make things simple for your family, for your loved ones. Because when they have to go searching, oh my gosh, our worst case scenario was a daughter who it took her 5 years to finally figure out everything that was in her mom's estate. 5 years. She had to quit her job. She had to move to Arizona and basically spend a full-time job 5 years doing this. She tried to go back into the workforce when she finally got that to the point where it was done. She was in her mid-60s. She really couldn't find a job. Organize, consolidate, make this simpler for them. Sin number 11, failing to leave behind passwords, email accounts, online stuff. This is critical. Everybody's got online accounts, even more now that the pandemic has hit and everything is being moved to online, right? Normally, I'd be in a room with you, I'd be shaking your hands, and I'd be talking to you afterwards. Today, I'm on a screen. Everything is online now. Make sure you've got a system to pass these things on. If you don't have this, they can lock up those accounts instantly, and then nobody knows how to get it. We had a sad story this year where a young guy passed away in his 30s, and he actually ran an IT company. He owned a computer company where they managed internet and computer services for businesses. So he knew how important passwords were. What he didn't realize was that people need those passwords if he's gone. He passed away with nobody knowing what the passwords were. And so we're in the process of having to hire like a hacker, a legal hacker, to try to figure out how to break into his computers, because he has tens, and we're thinking maybe even close to six figures or more, six figures, like hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Bitcoin that we're not sure if we're going to be able to recover. But we've got people trying to figure it out, and his family's trying to figure it out, because to lose all of that would be such a waste. Store your passwords somewhere. What do? How do you pass them along? There's no perfect answer here. I know that the worst answer is to not pass them on. So my recommendation is either have a paper somewhere where you keep track of these things, or some type of password service. There are some password services out there that you can investigate and find one that you feel comfortable with, that stores your passwords for you, lets you put somebody in there who's a delegate. So, you can name like your spouse, your son, your daughter, so that if there's an emergency, then they can get access. And make sure you do something, because nothing is the wrong answer. And then with all of your funding, so when you set up a trust, it all has to be coordinated and pointed back to your estate plan. You can't just create the trust and then leave it on the shelf. You've got to then you got to change the title on your house. You got to tell your bank, you got to tell your financial advisor, your life insurance, all of them, that they have to be aware of your trust and they have to be re-registered into that name. And it's a lot of paperwork. It's a pain in the butt, trust me, but you got to get it done. You've got to get it done, because if you don't get those things into your trust, then your family is stuck still having to go through probate, even though you did a trust. We have that happen every year, where somebody didn't get something into the name of the trust. All right. Sin number 12, failing to keep your plan current for every day. This is one that I fought for a long time, because I was trained, when I was trained 15, 16 years ago, how to do this. I had this impression, I had this idea that you do your will and, like, it's done kind of for a long, long, long time. You don't need to look at it again. You set it in stone and it's done. What I ended up finding out just while I was working is that these families were coming back to us with a will or a trust even from the firm I was working at. And it's like, wait a minute, why are they coming back to us and having to go through probate when they did all these things? And it was just over and over and over again. They were having to go to probate because their plan wasn't kept up to date. And, when you let something go 10 years without maintaining it, I mean, how well does your car work if you don't maintain? How well does your health work? I went to the dentist for the first time in 10 years, and, I read the Riot Act. I scheduled my next appointment right away. things just have to be kept up to date. How quickly do laws change? Think about it. There's Arizona laws, there's that relate to your trust, that relate to taxes, that relate to probate. Then there's federal laws, or I'm sorry, then there's the case law, opinions that interpret all of those. And then this whole thing happens at the federal level too. There's tons of laws that affect your family, that affect your financial life. These laws are changing on a constant basis, especially this year with Biden coming into the presidency. And we have proposals to change the capital gains taxes, the income taxes, the estate taxes, the gift taxes. All of them are being proposed to change. Lots of updates are going to happen this year. We need to keep your legal documents up to date. You've got to be watching for these things. Every single year, we see somebody pass away multiple times where their families are going, oh my gosh, they had a will, they had a trust, but why are we having this big giant tax bill? Because they didn't keep it up to date. And so keeping your plan up to date is what's necessary. For me, what the most frustrating thing is when somebody says that, I just did this in another state. We moved to Arizona. Do I really have to update this? The answer usually is yes. You're under a different legal system. And if you don't have your documents up to date in this system, you can't consider yourself to have peace of mind. I can't give you peace of mind about that. I want you to have peace of mind about that. And then the other question I get is, are these documents valid? Like that's the word we use, valid, right? And most likely the answer is yes, it is valid. And that's this very minimum threshold that is down here. We were able to once get I don't have a 3x5 postcard that I can show you guys, but you know how big they are, right? Little tiny 3x5 postcard. We were able to get a will written on one of those declared valid by the court after somebody had passed away. It was declared valid. That minimum designation, it cost that family almost $250,000 in a legal battle to finally get it declared valid. That is a minimum threshold standard. What most people are looking for is like, I want this to be simple for my kids. I want this to be easy for them. I don't want them to have to worry about this. And you know what? I don't want to have to worry about this. It's a higher standard. It's not the minimum standard. And so, yeah, you want to maintain these and keep them up to date, because when you don't, you run the risk of ending up in probate. This is one of our clients who had to go to probate to get a living probate for her husband because she let her documents get out of date. They were 10 years old when she needed them, and her husband's dementia declined to the point where she had to take over everything. And they were rejected by their investment advisor, his compliance department. The bank wouldn't honor them. The doctor said your healthcare power of attorney doesn't include the latest laws that you need to take care of your husband. So she had to go to court. And this picture is the picture of her actual court list of documents that have been filed in that court case. And this was only part of them. This thing is still going on. It's about 13 years later. And they've spent so much money on probate fees and wasted so much money doing that. It's just not worth the small investment it takes to get your plan put together. Okay, let me breathe for a second and just kind of summarize. I am a big fan of getting something done. Something is better than nothing. Okay, get something done. And I'm an even bigger fan of keeping that something up to date. And I recommend you do that just with a once a year, just check in with yourself. Is there anything in my finances that have changed? Anything in the family members, anything in the people that are in our plan that have changed? Anybody, any new births, anybody pass away, marriages, divorce, anybody disabled, any health issues, all of those things. All of those things might require you to change something in your legal documents. I'm an even bigger fan of saying Arizona requires wills to go through probate. You can't guarantee yourself to avoid probate with a will. A trust is basically a replacement in Arizona for your will. It just gives you the opportunity to avoid it all going through probate and letting your family take care of things in a nice, simple way. And then during life, that's the big key, is your trust actually takes care of you while you're alive. A will doesn't do anything for you while you're alive. And then your power of attorneys fill in all of the details there. I should have shown you this slide while I was describing that. Real quick, this would be what I would consider as a minimum list of documents to create when you're creating a a trust package. Anybody you look at should give you at least all of these documents. They should help you create all of them. I'm not a fan of doing things that aren't necessary and just doing extra work just for the fun of it. These are things that are necessary. There's a couple things in here that are specific to married couples. And so if you're not a married person, then you could toss that out. But a revocable living trust, you want the summary so that your family can digest something that's not in legalese. Pour over will, a nomination summary. This again lets them see who's designated where. The trust funding chart, the certificate of trust, assignment of personal property, a community property agreement, financial, durable power of attorney, healthcare, mental health power of attorney, HIPAA authorization, living will. Need some memorial instructions in there. A certificate of no elder abuse. Arizona, like I said, is a big state with regard to protecting seniors from exploitation. This deals with that. Having your ethical will prepared. This is those statements, right? Those stories that you create that give life and meaning to what you're leaving behind. Your estate plan, that's what we call the part of your plan that deals with your passwords for everything that's online. And then some trustee duties. So your trustee, whoever you name, your son, your daughter, to be in charge of this process so they know what to do. Give them some guidance. This is the basic what I would recommend for anybody out there. And is there a dollar amount? No. I think to avoid all of these problems, what's my minimum dollar amount? How much money do I need to have in order to have a trust? Everybody, right? There's no difference in my mind anymore between a will and a trust. A trust is basically a will. It just does a better job. And so everybody should just get all of these things done. Do the trust because it does a better job. And then you can avoid all these problems. All right. Now that is all the time I had content for. I see a question there in the chat box and I'll go ahead and answer it. I don't have time for more questions. But Judy asked, who decides when you cannot make decisions with a mental POA? Great question. Essentially, that is going to, that moment in time is going to be determined by the doctors. And it's your doctor, generally speaking. If there's a hospital, it's going to be the hospital doctor who's going to say to the family, hey, Judy, I'm sorry, Judy can't be making decisions. We need somebody who's got that legal authority. Sometimes if you have your documents in place, those documents will say, how that process is decided. Sometimes it's two doctors, sometimes it's a family member, but your documents may spell that process out. All right, that is all I have time for. I can catch my breath. And Cheryl, I will welcome you back to wrap us up. Make sure I've got the correct thing.
I think that takes care of my voice.
There we go. You're back.
Awesome.
Well, thank you for the opportunity, Cheryl. I really appreciate it. I hope this was helpful and I hope you guys learned something.
Thank you, Francisco, for your time today. And thanks to all of our friends who joined us for this presentation. I just want to remind you that we do have another one coming up next week. It will feature Elaine Poker-Yount, who is a gifted speaker, I call her aging expert. She's a guest columnist for the Arizona Republic, and her topic will be a great follow-up to today, calling Setting Up Your Plan B, which she will go over some of the documents that Francisco discussed today that you should have in place, but she gets a little deeper where she discusses things like, in the case of an emergency, can her ICE documents and ICE contacts be found? If you have someone in your family with dementia, do you have Alzheimer's ID bracelets for you and your spouse? Some other information about listing of doctors and medications. So if people who aren't aware of your medical conditions are helping you, they know what to have. So this would be a great follow-up for today. And she's awesome she is full of information. So I invite you to join us again next week at noon for What's Your Plan B with Elaine Poker-Yount. So thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.